Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the latest tech talk on the next generation of IEEE 802 networking standards. We would like to thank our sponsor of this event, Fedicom. I'm Jennifer McLean, Senior Manager of Education Products with IEEE Educational Activities, and I will be helping to moderate today's event. IEEE is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. Please note a few housekeeping items before we get started. At the bottom of your screen are engagement tools that are resizable and movable, so you can move them around to make the most out of your dashboard space. If you have questions for today's panelists, you can submit them through the Q&A widget on your screen or click the purple Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer as many questions as time allows. If you click the green resources icon at the bottom of your screen, you'll find more information about IEEE 802 standards and past and future virtual events. The on-demand link for today's Tech Talk will be emailed to all registrants approximately 2 hours after we finish. And if you'd like to tweet about this event, please use the hashtag IEEELearn. Our panelists today are Paul Mikulich and Dr. James Guild, who will provide an overview of next generation activities in the IEEE 802 LAN-MAN Standards Committee. Paul Mikulich is an IEEE Fellow and Chair of IEEE Standards Committee on Standards, overseeing the advancement of technical standards activities across all IEEE societies and councils, and is Chair of the IEEE Computer Society's 802 LAN-MAN Standards Committee. Dr. James Guild is with General Atomics Aeronautical Systems as a Principal RF Systems Engineer. He has held a variety of leadership positions in the IEEE 802 LAN-MAN Standards Committee and is currently the 802 First Vice Chair and Technical Editor of 802.15 Working Group. I'll now turn it over to Paul to begin.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you very much, James, for joining me in this first of a series of tech talks looking at emerging technologies within 802 networking standards. Before I get started, I want to make sure that everyone knows that all of the opinions that you hear are either mine or James, and they're not in any way related to the IEEEs. So, and before we get started, I want to reiterate what Jennifer said. There's a Q&A option. Please, during the presentation, if you have any questions, put those questions in the Q&A box, and James and I will do our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. So first off, let me just give everyone an overview of the 802 organization. Broadly speaking, we develop interoperability specifications for data communications equipment, and we're broken down into three major segments. There's interoperability specs for wired applications, that's called Ethernet. And then we have interoperability specs for wireless communications. The largest one is 802.11 wireless LANs, commonly known as Wi-Fi. And then we have a group that develops bridging and architecture technical specifications to allow these networks to communicate across the wireline and wireless media. So that's the way we're currently organized, and we're broken down into these working groups, and that's what these boxes are. So I won't go into any details there. Just wanted to give you a sense of how 802 is organized. And these Tech Talk series, we're basically introducing the Tech Talks that are coming in 2022. We're briefly going to touch on each of these topics: time-sensitive networking, some of the higher speed and single-pair Ethernet work, the wireless specialty networks. We're going to go into some of the 802.11 activities and coexistence as well. So what James and I will be quickly going through today will be covered in greater depth later on in 2022, as you can see here. So with that, let's get started. We're going to, in the past few years, there's been a tremendous demand for what's known as time-sensitive networking. And one of the great aspects of 802 is we're pretty much driven by market demand. And so we've responded to that with a series of 802.1 interoperability specs that James is going to tell us a little bit about now. So James, you have the floor.
Excellent. So the IEEE 802.1 time-sensitive networks, or TSN, is a set of standards developed by 802 to enable the deterministic delivery of data in a packet-based network. In a traditional network, the latency of the packet delivery, that is the time it takes to deliver them, varies over a wide range of values, with a few packets arriving very late. In a deterministic network, the packets are delivered with an agreed-upon time window. Note that the latency of the packet still varies within the time window, but there won't be any late packets.
Okay, very good, James. Oops.
And so there's a variety of use cases for time-sensitive networks. For example, in industrial automation, oil and gas and water, and similar fields, networks are used to control and automate the machinery, and this requires a guarantee that the control messages will be delivered within a bounded latency. For multimedia applications, such as those for mobile networks, healthcare, and transportation, late data can't really be displayed, so delivering it late just wastes the bandwidth and degrades the quality. So there's a lot of applications for this time-sensitive networking.
Excellent, yeah. And as James indicated, the demand is just increasing for this bounded latency type applications, and there's quite a bit of activities going on in 802.1 to support that. But of course, those time-sensitive networks are operating over wireline and wireless networks, and what we're going to go into now is a description of each of those activities in both the wired and wireless domains. So James, tell us a little bit about what's going on in the Ethernet space.
Yeah, so one of the things that IEEE 802.3, which is responsible for the Ethernet standard, is they regularly perform an assessment of the future bandwidth requirements for Ethernet technology. So the most recent bandwidth assessment was completed in 2020, and not surprisingly, this assessment shows a continuing increase in the bandwidth requirement across the areas served by high-speed Ethernet. The IEEE 802.3 has just started a project to increase the data rates for Ethernet to 800 gigabits per second and 1600 gigabits per second, or 1.6 terabits per second, and to deliver higher density, lower cost solutions for the 200 gigabits and 400 gigabits per second. Unlike previous projects, this one will address not just the needs of the core or the backbone network, but also address an upgrade of the feeds of the existing 200 and 400 gigabit per second connections to the core network, so that this new standard will be able to answer all the requirements for the next generation of bandwidth.
Very good, James. Yeah, and we just kicked off that project. As a matter of fact, there was a standards board meeting today that formally approved that project. So that's a brand new project that's just getting started today. James, what else are they doing in the Ethernet group?
Yeah, so interestingly, in addition to the super high data rate, there's still a lot of demand for the lower data rate Ethernet. And in these applications, one of the requirements or the goals is to save cost and weight. And so using a single pair of wires instead of 4 pairs of wire and carrying both data and power is a goal. So this enables you to connect the sensor, for example, in an automobile, that instead of 4 pairs of wire for data and 1 pair for power, only a single pair of wires is required to connect it. And that simplifies the wiring harness, reduces cost, and improves fuel efficiency by reducing the weight of the wiring harness. In some applications, you can increase this savings by using a single pair of wires to service multiple endpoints in what's known as a multi-drop configuration. And people are looking at this in applications in industrial, building automation, and automotive areas as well. So that's a brand new area that's sort of at the other end of the spectrum for speed, but with huge numbers and high demand.
Right, James, and this complements the time-sensitive networking technical specs as well, right? Because for autonomous vehicles, you got to make sure that those braking packets get to the brakes on time, right? Absolutely,
and also for the sensors, knowing that something's coming up. If you get feedback from a collision avoidance sensor, that being able to do these things in a time-sensitive way is absolutely critical.
Yep. So that covers the wireline aspects of IEEE 802, some of our new activities. We're going to move on to the wireless side, and there three major components to it. So the first one is 802.11 wireless LANs, which most people know as Wi-Fi. So James, tell us a little bit about what's going on there in terms of their new work.
Right, so there's a new standard, IEEE 802.11be, for extremely high throughput, or what we call EHT. And it's going to define wireless data rates of up to 30 gigabits per second for this .11 or Wi-Fi type networks, and still maintain backward compatibility for the older devices. Now they're going to look at a variety of techniques to achieve this goal. They're looking at wider bandwidths of up to 320 megahertz, more efficient uses of the resources, and improvements to the underlying protocol, and as well as taking advantage of new spectrum allocations. And of course, there's always an effort to improve security in these networks. So the new standard is going to address the needs of Ultra HD streaming, 4K and 8K, and support augmented and virtual reality and remote office applications.
Right, and I just want to note that we recently completed this current generation of Wi-Fi called Wi-Fi 6 in 802 speak. That's 802.11ax. And that took about 6 or 7 years to complete in terms of getting that project done. And James, because of the number of features and complexity in 11BE, I wouldn't be surprised if this project took a similar amount of time.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of technical contributions and a lot of opportunity for comment and input in this.
Yeah. And there's another new project that I'm very excited about called 802.11 BF Wireless LAN Sensing. Tell us a little bit about that project, James.
Yeah, this is exciting because it introduces novel motion detection features into the .11 family, and that's going to open a wide range of use cases. For example, fall detection, home security, health monitoring, and others. They're not directly related to sending network packets. So the product monitor is going to be able to monitor not just position, but also velocity, motion, and presence. At the high frequencies above 45 gigahertz, this will even enable the technology to detect breathing and issue warnings in case a person stops breathing. So you can consider this as something you might put in a hospital room to monitor a patient passively. So really exciting stuff.
Yeah, and what I think is especially exciting is that you can use existing equipment as is to extract this position and motion information from the RF energy that's flying around as a result of your Wi-Fi activity. It's pretty exciting new area for us to be pursuing. So let's move on to the 802.15 wireless specialty networks and some of the new work that's going on there. James, please let us know.
Yeah, so 802.15 wireless specialty networks, they include a bunch of different standards, really distinct standards that address distinct application spaces. This goes all the way from lower data rate networks that are below 1 megabit per second that support ultra-low power sensors, industrial networks, and critical infrastructure. They also have a sort of another set of groups that do higher data rate networks greater than hundreds of megabits per second for special short-range applications and multimedia networks. They've also created standards for free space optical communications. And the latest project is using ultra-wideband communications for secure precision ranging applications. So ultra-wideband communications use a very wide frequency band, greater than 500 megahertz, and very low transmit power. This enables this technology to coexist with other technologies in the bands. And secure ranging is used in applications like remote entry for automobiles, where instead of having to have a key fob, you could get your smartwatch or your smartphone coded so that as you walk up, the door unlocks, and then it enables you to turn on the engine and drive your car.
So, James, on the ultra-wideband, I've got a question for you. That operates over an extremely wide frequency range where there are existing services, yet it's still able to operate simultaneously with those existing services. Can you just explain, how does that work?
Right, so because the transmit power is very low and spread over a wide band, and most of these services are narrow band, and so the power in each of those narrow bands is actually even lower. And so when you look at it from a radio point of view, by spreading the energy and keeping it very low, it still doesn't look like an interferer to these existing services, which enables us to basically reuse the frequencies in an efficient way. And it has a very short range impact, so we're not If you're opening your car, you're not also interfering with a cell tower that's 200 or 300 feet away. And so that's a really interesting way to reuse the frequencies, which are very limited for us.
Right. I mean, the whole issue of, efficient utilization of spectrum is a huge one for the entire industry. And this helps address one of those issues. I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please type your questions into the Q&A box, and James and I will get to it at the end of the talk here. Okay, let's move on. So next up, speaking of coexistence, we have a group that's specifically dedicated to coexistence. And in this instance, it's coexisting by figuring out how to operate in parallel with other services, but not at the same exact time and not at the same exact set of frequencies, which is different than the ultra-wideband. So, James, tell us a little bit about the coexistence work that we're engaged in 802.
Yeah, so coexistence below 1 gigahertz, we have a couple of standards that both operate in the same frequency band. And because there's similar bandwidths and in the same frequency band, similar powers, they have a real chance to interfere with each other. So you can imagine if you're in a room with people speaking different languages and trying to understand them, that you can have problems figuring out what's going on. So the trick is for these technologies is to find a way that the speakers take turns and when appropriate, recognizing that someone else is speaking, even though they don't really understand the other language. And so that's really, you can see that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and Wi-SUN, they don't even talk the same language, but they're overlapping. So we need to find a way to get them to coexist. And they're working on technologies for doing that.
Okay. And furthermore, perhaps the biggest issue, coexistence issue.
Right. So in the Wi-Fi has traditionally operated in unlicensed bands and 5G in licensed bands, and so they didn't overlap. But there's a strong pressure for 5G to use as much spectrum as possible to deliver the services people want. At the same time, Wi-Fi or 802.11 also has people using them, often in the same device. In a smartphone, you're going to have both. So the question is, how can you share these license-free frequencies? And so we have a group that's working with 5G to ensure that we maintain the rights of the incumbents in the spectrum are protected, but also to ensure that the access is fair, that one of the two technologies doesn't step on the other one and cause problems. This spectrum is highly sought after. Spectrum, they're not making any more of it. And so we really need to find a method that uses it as efficiently as possible and as fairly as possible. And so there's a standing committee in 802.11 that's working on that.
Yeah, this speaks to the issue of convergence, and we're seeing this in the industry overall. There are the mobile wireless networks that used to operate exclusively over licensed frequencies, and then the Wi-Fi services that operate over unlicensed. But the both operate in tandem with one another, and I'm sure people have, experience, going from their mobile network service to a Wi-Fi service using their smartphones. It's a very common feature, and it's going to be critical for the two organizations, 802 Landman Standards, as well as the 3GPP organization that's developing the specs for mobile networking, to collaborate and coordinate on coexistence. So thank you very much on that point, James. And as we were going through the slides, I realized that we left, this is our last formal slide, but I realized that we left off an important new activity that's just being kicked off in 802, which is the revision of the overview and architecture. And James, you were the lead editor on that document way back in 2010,
14.
Was it? 14.
We finished in 2014.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about what the plans are there.
Right. So one way that we can make sure we integrate all of our technologies and work in a cooperative way among the various wireless and wired technologies, that you have a seamless handoff and that all the applications work. And so part of that is defining sort of these interoperability and how all our standards of interoperability standards work together. And so the 802 overview and architecture is a way to do that, to gather all that into a single document.
Right, and there's been significant changes in the underlying technology in the past 7 years that need to be incorporated into this architecture document. You know, one of the things that I'm looking at, we're excited about, is to somehow integrate machine learning capabilities into the architecture to allow us to more effectively and efficiently utilize the network resources that you have access to. So that's an exciting new area that we're just kicking off. Once again, I want to remind everyone we're going to be going into detail in each of these topics that we've covered. Not each of them, most of the topics that we've covered over the next several months in 2022, as you can see on the slide over here. So we'll be addressing most of the topics. And so now that brings us to the Q&A portion of the presentation. Oh, before I do that, for anyone that wants more details in each of those working groups, if you remember the organizational slide that I showed at the top of the Tech Talk, each working group has a web page. You can go to that web page and get more details from those web pages. But please, take time to attend these further Tech Talks. So with respect to, we're not going to end yet. Let's go to the Q&A. James, how does new work get started in 802? We got a lot of new work going on. If I'm on the outside looking in and I've got some really cool ideas to bring, how do I go about doing that? How do I get that into 802?
Yeah, that's a question we get a lot. And so work basically 802 is contribution driven, which is all the work basically comes in because somebody submits a contribution. So the question is, how do you do that? Well, each working group provides time for new ideas to be presented, and the way that's done varies between the working groups. In a couple of the working groups, they have the 802.11h15, they have a wireless next generation, and you just basically sign up for a slot and say, I'm going to present a presentation, and try to build some consensus around the idea. You'll get feedback from people who see the presentation, get to answer questions. Very often you'll find some excitement among people saying, yeah, I want to help and I have some ideas as well. And that starts off the process of bringing new work in. In 802.3, I believe it's different how they do that, but the best way to do it is to contact the working group chair and ask them what the process is, especially if you're very new to 802. They're very helpful, and they'll say, hey, bring it in this way. Be sure you use the right template. Review the contribution and the patent policies and all the things that are required. And we're a pretty good group to work with, and most of the time we're very good at, if you make a mistake, we're going to help you out. Once you've presented the idea, the next step is to either form an interest group or what we call a PAR study group, which is a project authorization request, which is a formal start to a standard. And then you would work with people and build consensus and generate the documentation required to form the beginning of a standard. And so that's a really good process.
So, you know what, James, as you were speaking, it occurred to me that this is one of the serious challenges we have in 802 now that we're meeting 100% virtual. Back in the old days when we got together in person, and we would get together in person 3 times a year in plenary session where we have about 700, 750 people, engineers working on these standards. And in interim sessions, another 3 times a year where you'd have 500 or 600 people getting together. These innovative new ideas would sprout up from the ground, and we'd be able to provide some guidance, real live guidance to people with new ideas. And since we're virtual, that's not happening. And this is one of the reasons James and I are very strong proponents of trying to get us back to in-person meetings as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, this whole pandemic situation is preventing it. So hopefully by the middle of 2022, we'll be back face-to-face. But James, do you have any thoughts on that, the importance of in-person gatherings?
Yeah, well, one of the nice things about that is you can meet people outside, and you don't have to ask a question in front of other people. I think you can form those personal relationships that will help you out. We're doing the best we can virtually, but it's hard when you don't get to know someone. So I think that'll be an advantage. But we can still, even if you can't travel, you don't have the budget, don't let that stop you from trying to contribute as much as possible as well.
Okay. We have a question from Jennifer. She says, if there are so many people participating across various technical areas, how logistically is this handled?
Well, that's one of the reasons we try to meet in person, is that you can wander among the meetings and meet other people. We will have up to 30 sessions in parallel because we still have to basically group by what we're working on. If we did it serially, it would take too long. I don't know how else to answer that question.
Okay. Another question from Shima, who asks, she's joining from Pakistan. Sir, how can I get these slides? They're going to be made available through a link that will provide access to the slides. So that will be handled by our staff. Here's another question. What new areas have the most potential societal impact? James, you take that.
Well, so from the point of view of what you'll see, it would be something like the new remote sensing application. You'll see new devices that implement that. It's sort of in the background. What will happen, but you won't see it exactly, will be the higher data rate links that are being supported by the extremely high throughput for 802.11. You'll get more pervasive connection at very high speeds. And you can't support that with the stuff you never see, which is the work going on by 802.3 and their high-speed connectivity. So I think you'll see that those you won't see, but still are going to have a huge impact. To a lesser impact, but still important, is the automation of the 802.3, the multi-drop, the low speed. I don't think, it's not world-changing, but it's increasing efficiency in automobiles, increasing efficiency in industrial plants, home automation. That's going to provide, the incremental increases that's going to save energy and help us run things better as a planet. But and if we keep doing that as engineers, we can't always look for how do we get something 100% done. But if we get 10% every few years, we're moving in the right direction. And I think those technologies are incrementally making us better, that are moving us in the right direction.
Those are good points. A lot of the technology that's standardized in 802, the average person is simply not aware of. It's buried in the infrastructure. It's like the power infrastructure or the water infrastructure, yet it's very critical to the overall operation of society. Here's another question for you. How does 802 determine if a new activity has the potential to be successful? What is the means by which we screen for high viability? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's very important to us, in fact, that we have a specific document that addresses these questions, because it takes a lot of effort to create a standard, and it takes effort out of the people working on it. And so we want to focus our energies on what's going to make the big impacts. And we have a document called the 5 criteria that a new project fills out that addresses things like, how big do we think the market will be? Is there a chance of achieving its goals? How is it going to fit into the architecture? And so that 5 criteria is created, and then it's reviewed by the working group, which is, that are experts in the area, and also by the standards committee, to see that they've made some effort in answering the question. And this project really does have the attention of people, as well as the potential to make a difference and be a commercial success. And we do that before we approve a project authorization request, or a PAR, that enables the new work and the development of the standards. So we're relying on the members of our group to go back to people in their companies or wherever to answer that question and bring it forward to us as a group.
Yep. That's one of the key elements of success, I think, of 802. You know, we've been around for 40 plus years, and you know, we've done a lot of good stuff. Some of the stuff has gone by the wayside and never got developed, but what we did complete has had significant impact. And one of the before we're at the bottom of the hour, but before we end, I'd like to mention the fact that one of the areas that I'm trying to encourage the development of within 802 is to get the research community to become more engaged in 802. Traditionally, we don't have many researchers, either academic or industrial researchers in 802, because they're working on technologies that probably are not going to get deployed in 5 to 10 year time frame, whereas in 802 we're working on technologies that are nearer term than that. But I think it's important if we get those two communities to work together and to collaborate, from the 802 community point of view, we'll be able to influence some of the research that's being done, and from the researcher's point of view, they'll be able to bring in some novel techniques that we may not have typically thought of. So I'm actively engaged in trying to get some next-gen workshops going and to promote that over the next couple of years. So with that, we're at the bottom of the hour. I want to once again very much thank my first vice chair, James Gill, for giving us some of his time and insights into 802. And Jennifer, I'll let you wrap it up. Jennifer?
Okay, thanks so much, Paul and James, for such a great discussion, and thank you all for attending today. As noted, we'll send out an on-demand link for the event to everybody who attended and all registrants, in fact, in approximately 2 hours from today, from now. And we invite everyone to register for our next virtual tech talk, and you can find more information about that event in the resource list. And before you leave, if you could complete our feedback survey, we'd really appreciate it. And thank you all, and have a great day.
And thanks to Set2Com for their sponsorship. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.